the signature, low signature of a stealthy object is getting less and less survivable, because now modern radars can see.
Everything you believe you know about modern air combat is wrong, and it has been wrong for at least 2 decades. Well, I suppose that in this case we need a real expert telling you the truth. Enjoy. Okay, Jussi, thank you very much for coming back and speaking with us. So for those of you who don't know you, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Augusti. Always a pleasure to speak to you, even though it's online like this. I'm Jussi Halmatyä, the operations advisor, air domain of the fighter business at Saab Aeronautics. In my role here at Saab, I do mostly marketing and sales supports, but also system requirements, program development for the Gripen E mostly. Background, 24 years Air Force pilot, frontline, grew up with the Viggens and then transit into Gripens. I was an operational tester. I did work as a weapons instructor on the transformation program that we did back in 15 years ago. I was a test pilot here at Linköping, working mostly on Gripen C capability. Done various staff tours, working on the BVRAM Meteor capability, Swedish representative, Gripen E requirements, then at Saab. So flying background, just above 2,300 hours, mostly Viggen Gripen, but also most of the Western fighters and trainers flew with them in my capacity as test pilot. So broad experience in brief.
Definitely broad experience. Yeah. So first question, the theme of this interview is the 5th generation air combat. So it seems to the layman that 4th generation and 5th generations are quite different beasts. The United States Air Force has really ponderous documentation that is very abstract, very doctrinal, which sometimes I punish myself for reading from cover to cover. I can understand that, but it's still difficult to get the grasp of what is really changing. So what you do in a 5th generation aircraft that you don't do in a 4++ and vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah, the generational concept is quite interesting, and there are actually different concepts of fighter generations over the years. But the one that we refer to as 4th, 5th, or the common Western world refers to as 4th and 5th, it's really a construct of some aircraft design authority in the US, where to us, or to me at Saab, it's a description of level of technology rather than capability. And we would like to more focus on the capability aspect. So what creates survivability, lethality, flexibility, availability, and all those things that you need to create and construct modern air power. But that said, it's those who made up the 4th, 5th generation concept have been largely very, very triumphant, because everyone is using it. And it's 5th gen is denomination stealth, data fusion, and so on and so on. But I think I would rather like to say the conventional way of fighting over the last 25, 30 years with 4th gen, if you allow me. And then now transforming that into platforms with all the sensors that we have now. So we are treating now the mission data as your greatest weapon. How you collect that and how you transform that, how you data link it, and how you create fighting capability. That is the big transitional change now, and what the network-enabled warfare and weapons allow us to do. So passive sensors, active sensors, that makes us pilots having to unlearn and relearn the way we have always done things. And it's very interesting, and we are now, with Gripen E, platforms like F-35 and maybe some others coming soon, now learning about all these new things and how we have to transform ourselves. It's very interesting times.
Let's get into a bit more detail. Let's start with the sensors now. So people playing DCS, which incidentally are quite a large fraction of the viewers of the channel, they are used to play with the radar, with the pulse repetition frequency, the scan pattern, all these kind of things. This 5th generation aircraft, it seems that they are treated quite differently. It seems that you can't play around with your sensor too much. Is it correct? How is it working?
So the new, I can give example of a Gripen E, for instance, because that's close to my heart and that's the product I know best as a reference. So having a platform now with 40 apertures, with the main aperture radar, but having 40 different antennas around the aircraft, that gives you spherical, not only 360, but spherical, active, passive detection. That changes things. So every Gripen in this case collects terabytes of data everywhere they fly, always. So that's the passive approach. So if you can start collecting data without transmitting, that is how the common tactics is now constructed. So a 2-ship, 4-ship of modern platforms with the radar is always on, but it's passive. All the sensors are always on and they collect data. And then you send the data over high-rate data link between the 4-ship or the 2-ship. And this is how you create situational awareness. So now we can forget about the button pressing, that one fighter pilot uses his or her own radar, turns it on, changes frequencies to get the optimal detection. That is old way of doing it. So now constructing algorithms and decision support in platforms based on high-level commands. So trust the system. It will fix the case for you. And don't go and make a lot of button pressing, because then you can actually even destroy. And in a 4-ship, if you do that as one team member, it can actually mess up the whole data fusion, passive exchange of information, and hence you are not working with the system in an optimal way. So new ways of flying, new ways of operating the system, allowing, it's like an analogy could be an old Toyota and now a modern Tesla, where things just happen in the background and you have to trust the aircraft or the car and allow it to do so for you.
Well, it seems terrifying to me. I will never trust a Tesla anyway.
Yeah.
That's just me. But I suppose that this is also something that heavily influenced the way you are using the weapons. For example, you just described this kind of collaborative targeting. And so are you telling me that pretty much you're using your weapons mostly in passive mode?
Well, it depends. So the base, if you can always be passive without emitting from your own platform, that means that your signature will be lower, because the moment you start emitting radar energy or any other energy from your platform, then there will be passive sensors or with your enemy adversary that will be able to detect you and get situational awareness where you are. So the aircraft must now be able to tell you what is the value of your situational awareness. So everything you see, every track on the ground, on the surface, in the air, the Gripen E will tell the pilot what is the track quality of this particular item or that you see. And if for any reason this track quality, if the enemy start jamming you, or in any case, then the 4-ship will automatically collaborate to track support on every track to maintain high situational awareness of the robustness of that track so the resolution of angle, Doppler, so speed and range. So that's kind of the basic of automation to maintain robust situational awareness. But telling the pilot how good is your situational awareness. And if it goes really bad, then you have the choice of using your active radars as a support. Or maybe if you're in a weapons engagement and want to support track data in a particular phase for a missile approach before seeker opening, then you have decision support that will tell you that now you might want to actively use your radar. So these decision support items now work in favor of the pilot. And it's always to keep the workload low, especially when it's a shooting war, when you shoot at something or somebody's shooting at you. Everything needs to be super clear and super simple. And this is another design philosophy we use at the Gripen, where others have chosen different approaches, where we try to filter out information and only presenting the information for the pilot that he or she needs at that particular moment. This is what I think is keeping the workload low. And we see sensors that look 250, 300 kilometers plus. So it's amazing things you can do, but all the information that you have must have very powerful decision support. Otherwise, the battle-based environment will be too complex for any pilot.
Let's suppose you are doing a long-range shot with a meteor, launching a meteor.
Yes.
Obviously, when launching a meteor, you have, well, the infrared plume of the launch, but also you have at least a data link, so you can't really be completely passive. So you break the passiveness, the silence, the electromagnetic silence, only when shooting in practice or jamming.
Yeah, so when you do active jamming, that is when you start emitting radio frequency. And that's a given. Everybody understands that. To be able to fire a meteor or any weapon, really, you just need to have a track of certain quality. And how you acquire that track, so it's the target that you see on your display, that's the track. It can be a command and control, like an AWACS track sent to you over data link. It can be a passive track. It doesn't have to be a track that my own sensors have picked up. It's just a track that appears on my display that I can select and prioritize. Then when I shoot a meteor missile, of course, then the data link from my aircraft will start supporting that missile with data. But there are also new ways of network-enabled warfare, or the network-centric warfare, where you now can collaborate within your tactical air unit and have more flexible approaches to missile firings. So consider this. Why cannot you make mechanisms in a 4-ship or a 2-ship where one Gripen can fire the Meteor missile or any other missile, and another Gripen 20, 40, 30 miles away somewhere else can support that missile with data link? What about functions like this? When you build things like this into the system, this is when you can start using the fighting tactics in a brand new, innovative way, which transforms the fight entirely. So we are now talking about smart, network-enabled warfare functions that we are implementing into Gripen E today.
So many associate the 5th generation with stealth today. Stealth, either geometric or rather absorbing material. Yet, the Gripen E, which is a very modern aircraft, it's not particularly stealth from this point of view. So what's the concept behind that?
So stealth is really a technology that was constructed in the, I would say, late 70s to 80s, made possible by mix of hardware and software in the 90s. So in the 90s, early 90s, when we started seeing aircraft like the F-117 emerging into real-time operations. That's where it's very, very effective against the radar systems at that time. But that was 25, 30 years ago. So hence, since then, the radar technology and the networking between broadband radars, low UHF, VHF, even sensors like LiDAR, you have acoustic sensors, you have a mixture of sensors, and the adversary has these sensors networked. So the signature, low signature of a stealthy object is getting less and less survivable, because now modern radars can see, depending on what kind of different radars you have. And you can use that information in the network to fire missiles and find the stealthy targets. And everyone is now realizing that, even though it's not being said clearly. If you listen to generals like now retired Kelly, who used to be the CCA commander in the US Air Force in the US, that says that we must be able to dominate the spectrum warfare. Otherwise, we will be second, and nobody wants the silver medal in war. So he realizes, and many others realize, that stealth as such is getting obsolete more and more and more because of the sensor technology and the missile technology that is out there already now. Looking at what the Chinese are doing and others, it's really scary. We have found or decided to create the survivability in a different way by using powerful electronic warfare instead. And having that capability with now added electronic attack capability, so we can suppress the systems instead. So this is just another way of creating efficient survivability, where we believe that stealth is no longer fully relevant and also very laborsome to maintain. So this is our approach, and I would say the trend, looking at listening to analysts today and the prominent thinkers in our field of work, are realizing this whole thing, that electronic warfare, spectral warfare, this is where you need to be able to dominate to be able to be successful.
Do you realize that you just kicked the hornet's nest?
Yeah, of course, and it can be debated, and everything in our field gets debated a lot, and I welcome that. But of course, if you can have stealth also, it will give you an element of protection against certain systems. But if you fight the high-end war, you must find different ways. And looking at F-35, which is the prime example, they are looking at a significant upgrade for the Block 4, whenever that comes, with the issues they have, if it comes, is going to be a great, significant increase in the electronic warfare capability of that specific platform. And that's for a reason, because the Americans realize that this is needed for the future war.
I'm skipping the next question because basically we just talked about it. It was about the cooperative targeting, but we basically already talked about it.
I can add a little bit on cooperative targeting, if you may. So it's about the sensor fusion. So that's one of the elements of many people say that that's something that is associated with 5th gen maybe. So collaborative targeting, passive sensing, internal weapons, stealth, and other things. But so the sensor fusion, this is something that most aircraft design authorities are focusing heavily on, because this is very challenging. And we know that every sensor fusion, every track that you see on your radar or somewhere else, is always going to be wrong to some extent. It's never going to be fully right. So how do you do sensor fusion? This is one of the greatest challenges of the four-ship battle, of the data exchange, the sensors, the collaborative track support. And so how do you do it? And there are many papers about this. You have to have very strong algorithms. In Gripen we have data fusion happening on the lowest echelon possible. So that means that you don't inherit all the little errors that various platforms and sensors provide you. So trying to have a collaborative data fusion at the lowest level on the platform. This seems to be the trend today. So that's quite interesting for the followers here to maybe comment on or ask questions about. How do you do data fusion? That's very, very interesting and complex these days.
Well, data fusion, as far as I know, is a scientific concept. It's used always in other fields. How it is done on combat aircraft is, difficult to. It's a complex subject, difficult to understand, particularly when the sensors are not on the aircraft, but on someone else's aircraft.
Oh yeah, and people raise their eyebrows when I say and we say that every coordinate is wrong, every data fusion track is wrong. So what do you need? You need complex weapons, smart network weapons, so you can manage that error when you do your engagement, or when you create your situational awareness. I don't know if you have a question about the complex weapons, what those are, but complex weapons needed, very much needed for the future complex mission sets, such as SEAD, but all the other missions as well. Efficient, complex network weapons, that's the trend.
I guess I never thought in these terms, but yes, it definitely makes sense. For example, do you see in your experience any difference between the European approach and the American approach?
Looking at the last 15, 20 years, and I'm starting with that maybe, most of the Western Air Forces today are trained by the Americans. So they have an American way of flying, which it's different from the Swedish way, because we have a different way of doing beyond visual range, where in the A90s we had the fighter Viggen with Skyflash, which is a short to medium range missile. And suddenly we had the adversary, the bad boys in the east, who were flying MiGs and Sukhois with AA-10 Chucks, massively outranging us. So we had to find new, better ways to create data links, first of all, to exchange information. We had data links already in the 80s on our jets, so that we can create situation awareness and be flexible in our way of flying in a foreship in a box, and also allowing the different elements in the foreship to have their own empowerment to make their own decisions by the data link information. So the foreship leader wasn't the guy or the girl that gave directions to his formation. Everyone were doing within their own tactical remit what they deemed to be the best. And this is the change here. When we in the 90s and maybe 10, still some years ago, go to red flag exercises or other exercises where we see 4-ship, 6-ship walls of F-15s or F-18s using completely different tactics, but it's constructed for a different purpose. So this is a change in the way Sweden is doing it, has always done it, and most other Western Air Forces is doing. That said, now with the new platforms, we must find new ways because we have so much information and so much networking. So I would see that we are now adopting a more flexible approach to maneuvering and tactical approaches and the performance of our formations that we have seen before. So more flexible, less rigid, because we can, and we must.
I understand. And how would you compare these, let's say, Western, at this point, approach with what the Russians and the Chinese are doing? They're very different things, but do you have any consideration about that?
Yeah. Traditionally, we have seen kind of concept operations from the East being quite centralized, so less power to the pilot, if allow me to say that, and more kind of a tactical director on an AWACS platform or something else that gives directions and gives missile engagement calls and stuff like that. I think that is also changing a little bit because also the East, they are getting better sensors and better platforms. So we are seeing a slight change, and we have very good friends who fly Gripens in the Royal Thai Air Force, one of our customers, who regularly, on a yearly basis, have a Falcon Strike exercise, they call it, where they operate with the Chinese. So many good, interesting experiences from how the Chinese now are transforming their way of doing BVR tactics, much like the West is doing right now. So going from an older way, rigid way, into a more modern, flexible way is also what we see with Eastern Air Forces now. And it's scary, but it's the world, and the platforms allow you to do it. So we adapt with it.
Let's settle one of the most debated subject on the internet about 5th generation aircraft. People say dogfight is obsolete because modern weapons have such a ridiculous range. But with 5th generation aircraft, if you can't see each other either by stealth or jamming, aren't you going to end up at close quarters anyway?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I'm sure many people are thinking about that. So you can also ask yourself, what is going to be the mission for a platform like F-35? Is it going to be air-to-air? You can debate that, but probably not. I would think today, with the concept that we use in the West today, a platform like F-35 within the NATO context would have a specific tasks, maybe to do suppression of enemy air defense or any other of the complex mission sets that it may be more suited to solve rather than getting into a BVR fight. Because, to be honest, it doesn't carry a lot of missiles. It's not very agile, so it's maybe not designed to do a BVR fight in the sense that other platforms are doing. So it's a mix of these capabilities that we have to choose between. That said, to your question, if you only operate 5th gen aircraft, if you allow me to say stealthy aircraft, I guess it depends on the scenario. Depending on the sensor network that you have. If you only use platform sensors versus platform sensors, you might end up in the close quarter fight. And for that purpose, we still have short-range weapons and short-range sensors on our platform so that we can actually manage that particular case as well. So it's an interesting question. I think it much depends on the scenario, and the way you choose to employ your platforms or your assets, I guess.
Modern air warfare seems to be deeply technological. Okay. And even relatively small advances in one technology area seem to be capable of giving an important advantage in the operational and tactical arena. And so the question, I guess, is how much room is there for tactics? So, do you see that in a confrontation, a technologically inferior air force, but with better training and better tactics, being capable of prevailing against a more technologically advanced air force?
That's a great question as well, I think, and I've thought quite a lot about that. And this is a question that we struggle with all the time. We can see, like you said, the increments in technology, may they be small or medium or big. Just one of the examples I gave you, the network-enabled warfare functionality that we've now created in our platform in Gripen E, that allows you to do very flexible missile firing, weapons support, and other things. So it's quite simple to get a very advantageous position and to maintain survivability against a heightened threat now with this technology. And that requires less training for the pilot to be able to manage that. So I think with the leaps and bounds, may they be small or big or in between in technology, is now what brings you great capability. So even if you have a less advanced air force with many jets, with great training, I think they will struggle quite a lot against the technology levels that we now see. The sensors, the ranges that we have on sensors and weapons, the networking. You just can't cope with how good pilot you ever are, but in a less advanced aircraft, you will struggle. Then you have, of course, air forces in the East that have 1,000 aircraft. So if you have a huge number of combat mass, and I think that's maybe, and one of the questions I saw on your list here is about the combat, the quality and quantity dilemma, and we will deal with that in a moment. But I would say technology is now giving you great capability that training might not catch up with anymore.
It seems like that Sun Tzu was right all along. Now you need to win before fighting.
It's about really finding clever ways to be agile, to be able to fly when you need to be able to do the mission you want to do at the time you need to be better than the enemy. We call it in Sweden, we call it creating local air superiority, because we don't have as many aircraft as the adversary have. So we have to find better, more clever ways of using our assets so that we can be successful in the fight when the fight comes, and be ready to take on when we need to. And we do it by new ways of technology. This is what we did in the 80s, 90s with the Viggen, with the data links. But this is what we're doing with Gripen E right now as well.
Understand. And we touched briefly about the quantity-quality dilemma, and I think that is something, one of the lessons of the events in Ukraine, of the conflict in Ukraine, at least on the ground, it was the fact that quality is important, but can compensate only up to a point against quantity. How is in the air combat domain?
Yeah, I think having a reasonable, sizable fleet of fighter aircraft or any assets that you need, it is still very important, because tails matter. So having the aircraft ready to fly on the ground or in the air, and having a sufficient number of aircraft with sufficient number of advanced weapons. So this is one of the kind of down parts of many of the stealthy aircraft, because they simply can't carry many missiles, and that's always going to be in looking at the whole concept of all the different mission sets that you have to do. It's going to be disadvantageous. So having many aircraft, many missiles ready, this is still going to be very important, and not only in the case of not peace, not war, or even God forbid war, but also in peacetime, so that we can prepare and train and be ready to keep our currency at high levels. if you have an adversary that has 1,000 aircraft, and if you have 100, well, undoubtedly 1 over 2 or 3 or maybe 10 of those 1,000 aircraft will come through. But hopefully we'll never have a war like that or a conflict like that. But it's interesting, in Ukraine we see the mix between new and old, where we have a trench war, which we fought in the First World War, for more than 100 years ago. And then a mix of very high advanced sensors and missiles. It's a very interesting mix. There will be many books written about this particular conflict that day, then hopefully it will end soon.
Well, let's finish with something a bit uplifting and a bit more personal, if you don't mind. So, in your career, what was the mission you were the proudest of, if you can obviously speak about it? Yeah. If you tell me that you shoot down an F-22 in a simulated combat, you will become a hero.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I never had the chance to fly against F-22s in a mission. I once flew with them on the same side, and I wouldn't have been a hero if I would have shot my buddies, my blue and blues down. So I didn't do that. But I think some of the missions that makes you most proud are maybe, because on my Viggen days we had not only the QRA on air-to-air, but we also have QRA on the reconnaissance part, because of the scenario we have in the Baltic Sea with everything in the air, but on the surface and under the surface, where we did a lot of important work chasing those things on the surface and under the surface, but also employing a strategic reconnaissance resource, which I can't really mention that much about, but doing these missions for a real purpose, close to some border somewhere, really close to some border, in a very complex, jammed environment, and be able to do it with an old platform that wasn't really suited to do that kind of mission right now. That was makes you proud to be able to deliver and solve that. But I can't really go into details, unfortunately, on those. But other things, other things that when you started flying the Gripen, and suddenly you have from the Viggen to the Gripen, suddenly you have an aircraft, especially when the sea came along. Suddenly you have an aircraft that can see. You have great situational awareness and fantastic decision support with still one of the best cockpit designs in the world today. So we were flying, I think, in France with against 2 Rafales. After first or second contact, which didn't end up too well for the Gripen, we started analyzing the rules that we had. So there was not a top speed laid out in the CUFs or the regulations for it. So nothing prohibited us from going supersonic. So all right, for the next contact, let's go full speed ahead. So after the merge, we had about Mach 1.46 or something like that, and they didn't quite pick up that we were ballistic like that. So after the merge, going straight up to 50,000 feet, and then coming down, and radar dogfight mode on, bling bling, fox, and there was a lot of French chatter on the frequency after that particular. So that was one of the whatever synthetic missiles. But that was a kind of some of the highlights that you remember. Okay, so we were able to think freely, we were able to adapt, and also use our system performance to its best without cheating. But because we didn't have to. So that was there are many stories, and we can next time we speak, I can probably tell you many more.
That would be interesting. The next one will be gas and use in front of a beer.
Oh yes, I hope so. I'm looking forward to that. Hope we can make that happen soon.
Thank you very much, Jussi. That was fantastic. Thank you very much for your time and your wisdom.
Yes, thank you very much for great questions and great communication. So we'll speak soon again. Cheers.
So, thank you very much for watching this video. It's a privilege and an honor to have had your time. This video was not sponsored by Saab, but thank you to Saab for the availability of doing these interviews and the support that they have given me. It was top-notch. You guys, you know who you are. Thank you very much. And also an enormous thank you to all those who are supporting the channel on Patreon, or by being a member, or by the other ways of donating to the channel. You are essential to this operation, and you will be essential for what is going to happen. Well, I guess this is it. Thank you again for watching, and see you next time.